Yeah. So, as you know, T, this podcast is all about working from home, being creative, as you are yourself, and the challenges, of course, that are unique to that, as well as obviously the current place that we're all in at the minute with this COVID crisis. So, let's just focus on a little bit more on the creative side of things. How important would you say is creative expression for an individual?
Creativity keeps you sane. I make no bones about it. Creativity, with the current COVID-19 crisis, I have written more than I have in the past 2 years put together. I was finishing Discord for Dummies when things started to hit.
Yeah.
Right after Discord for Dummies, I started work on the second edition of Social Media for Writers. Then the fourth edition of Podcasting for Dummies kicked in. And while all this is going on, Pip and I are talking about the third book in the Verity Fitzroy series, which is a spin-off series from the Ministry of Theory and Currency. And while all that's going on, just yesterday, I put out the feelers to my publisher about whether or not Twitch for Dummies could get an overhaul in 2021. And he said, you need to put together a proposal list for it because there is a possibility that may happen.
Yep.
And if that were to happen, that would mean that I would be going from one consecutive contract to another consecutive contract with the For Dummies people since 2019. Because I had Twitch for Dummies come out then, and then they contracted me to do a segment of YouTube for Dummies Junior, and then they contracted me for Discord for Dummies, and then they contracted me for the fourth edition of Podcasting for Dummies. If I could land another contract with Twitch for Dummies, that has been probably the most steadiest work I've had. And the point I'm getting at is that all this has kept me sane.
Yeah.
Well, I have friends who are like, the walls are closing in, they're starting to, and I'm like, well, you know what? If you've ever felt that you've had a book inside of you, now is the time to write it.
To do it.
Now's the time to sit down and do it.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish people would, because then people would get a look at what it's like to be me. And what I mean by that is,
yeah,
it happened this morning. I was playing my video games as usual, and some folks in the stream were basically telling me, you need to dedicate more time to this. Just a few minutes here and a few minutes there. And I said, you don't understand. You have never walked a day in my shoes. As soon as I'm done here, I've got something else to do. And then as soon as I get that done, I got to move on to something else. And as soon as that gets done, I have my day blocked out. And I'm making up, at the time of this recording, the day before, I had a migraine. So I was completely knocked out for the day. Which means not only do I have to do what I was planning for today, I've got to make up for the lost time from yesterday. And so, yeah, there's a lot of stuff on my editorial desk. And while some people go, well, you're stretching yourself too thin, at the same time, I enjoy it. I enjoy the grind. I enjoy the crunch. So creativity is important because it keeps you engaged. And you suddenly find, after you've created whatever it would be, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a stream, whether it's a chapter or short story, you look up and it's like, oh, I've got to get something to eat. And, you don't necessarily lose track of time, but you have something to focus on.
Yeah. But I think as well, from this aspect, creativity, it brings fulfillment and satisfaction to the person because you can see the end result of something that you've created. Yeah?
I would agree. But the hardest thing about creativity in the workplace is that your higher ups want to see the finished product now.
Yeah.
And if they don't see it happening straight away, they're like, why isn't this working?
Yeah.
And they take it from the perspective of time is money. And because of that, you have very little creativity in the workplace. That being said, one of the most creative jobs I ever had full time was with this organization called Code.gov, and they were a White House initiative from the Obama administration.
Yeah.
And I segue into this because I want to talk about creativity at the workplace and about how you have to have a boss with the right vision or the understanding of creativity and the worth of it. My boss was a guy named Alvin Salehi. He is the former senior tech advisor for the White House. And he's the guy that basically wrote the federal source code policy. You can look it up. It basically encourages federal agencies in the United States to, instead of commissioning new software, commissioning software that is open source and then sharing it amongst themselves and then eventually sharing it with the United States, with the American people. And my boss was extremely creative. So he wanted me to create what he called a hype video, something that would get people excited about code.gov. And that's all he told me. He said, I want you to create a hype video. And I said, well, what do you want in it? He goes, no. I just told you, I want a hype video. You figure it out. He did that because at our job interview, what got me the job as chief of communications at Code was he saw one of my book trailers and fell in love with it. Right. And he said, so who did all the work for you? And I said, nobody. I wrote it, I directed it, I edited it. He was like, you did all this on your own? He was like, yeah. So when he said he wanted a hype video, I was like, okay. Can you give me any kind of guidance? He goes, yes, no longer than a minute. I said, fine, challenging. And I spent an entire day creating this hype video. And the reason why it took me all day was that I was doing time-lapse photography, which was something he didn't ask for. I just decided to do it. And he saw the cut and he was like, this is exactly what I want. I said, well, I got one more I want to show you. And this is what happens when you get a creative guy like me, a little too creative. I created a video just for us in code.gov. And because it was all time-lapse photography, I basically did a spoof of the intro of the United States versions of House of Cards.
Oh, right.
And the intro, it's all time-lapse photography.
Yeah.
Thinking all this stuff. My project manager was convinced that this was the hype video that I was pitching. And he was like, we can't put that on there. That's a copyright violation. I said, and my boss is a huge fan of both versions of House of Cards.
Right.
Like, this is great. And I said, well, download a copy for yourself, but we can't share this anywhere.
Brilliant. Now,
he encouraged, and that's what you need for real success.
Yeah.
A boss that understands the power of creativity.